My name is Colleen Finca. I'm a librarian here at the Tempe Public Library. And I would like to welcome everyone to our Summer Scares author interview with Clay McLeod Chapman. Warm welcome to Clay for joining us today via Zoom. We are so appreciative that you're here. We love, obviously, librarians love authors and books, and to promote authors and books. So it's so good to meet you. How's your day been going so far?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be
Good.
here. I'm so thrilled that there's a crew of folks to talk about the remaking. I have my window open over here, so if there's a motorcycle or a stereo that blares by, I'll take the blame. That's Brooklyn outside.
It's totally
right
fine.
Great.
No worries at all. So welcome everyone who's joined us today. I would just like to give a little intro to Clay. Clay is a prolific writer. He has written short stories, comics, movies, plays, novels, and is also the creator of a storytelling session called The Pumpkin Pie Show, which I highly suggest checking out. I did on YouTube. Very entertaining. His novels include Miss Corpus, Whisper Down the Lane, The Remaking, which we will be discussing today. And his new novel is coming out September 20th called Ghost Eaters. And we're going to talk about, we're hoping that Clay will give us a little tidbits about that one coming up. And I'm also really interested, and I'll ask you this later, your upcoming project includes Unknown. It's called Unknown, and it's a psychological horror anthology television series produced at Kilter Films and Amazon Studios. And so we're going to talk about that later because I don't know. I really want to know about that. Okay,
Please.
so we'll just get started. So just to start out, Clay, can you give us just a little synopsis about the remaking, just without revealing too much for us?
Sure. It's an interesting challenge, right? I mean, the remaking, I think ultimately it is a ghost story told 4 different ways. Imagine that 1950s campfire tale that evolves into a 70s schlocky drive-in film, which then turns into a sleek, polished Scream style, Wes Craven style remake, which then gets turned into a true crime podcast. And, you know, at its heart, there is an actual true story that I found doing some kind of, researching and digging of the Little Witch Girl of Pilot's Knob. I turned it into the Little Witch Girl of Pilot's Creek. But if you're so inclined after reading the book and you want to do your own Googling, I dare you, I defy you to look for the Little Witch Girl of Pilot's Knob, Kentucky. It's a true story that kind of spins out into its own urban legend and then gets kind of appropriated by YouTube kind of mini Blair Witch videos and authors such as myself. So yes, that is, I guess, is that how I want to describe the remaking? The remaking is a ghost story that evolves over time and kind of transforms as media evolves. And it's the ghost story that won't die.
I love it because I love urban legends. Well, I love all things spooky, so I was really excited. I'm like, ooh, let's do the Summer Scares author interview. So
that's great.
Yeah, and so the one thing that I found when I read this book, I completely imagined this as a movie. Like when you started writing it, did you think this would be a novel, or would you want it to be a screenplay? Did you think it was going to be a screenplay?
I mean, yes, I wrote it with the intent of being a novel first, and that's just because that's how I started the story. But there is a very kind of mimetic quality to the story. Like it's a very lean novel. It's written in a very sparing, cyclical way that I feel like lends itself to not only film, but also kind of the oral tradition. Like there are a lot of, for better or for worse, this book in particular is dealing with a lot of different ideas and styles and pet obsessions of mine. Like I grew up down south. I'm from Virginia, where the oral tradition was kind of steeped into my upbringing. So for me, if I have a default, it's always going to be writing in the first person, because that's, honestly, like I love when a narrator, when a protagonist, a character talks to me, the reader, and treats me as if I'm kind of either a character within this book, or somehow kind of implicit within the story itself. So first person just kind of bridges the gap and brings the reader in a lot closer to the narrative, to the text. So you ask about film, and yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I totally imagined this as a movie, and it's amazing how you write a book. If you're very lucky, someone might publish that book, and if you're very, very lucky, someone might option that book. And if you're very, very, very lucky, someone might actually make that book into a movie. I at this point have been fortunate enough to have the book optioned, and it is amazing how the gears of Hollywood churn very, very slowly. And sometimes they just kind of spin out into their own, they just keep spinning and spinning and spinning. But maybe one day there will be a movie, maybe not. But I think, like, for me, the idea was like, it is a story first, it's a novel first, but then there's this strange kind of bridging the gap where, like, if you were to read it out loud, certain kind of passages come alive, or almost become kind of theatrical in of themselves. And then that kind of bridges the gap to other media, like podcasts, like film, like TV. For me, like, it was really important to kind of think in terms of like all forms of media, and how media, like very specific forms of media, then engage with their audience. Like how does a movie engage with its audience? How does a podcast engage with its audience? How does a theatrical performance engage with its audience? And they're very, very, very different, but I don't know, like there's something very kind of, like, as a film fan, as a fan of theater, as a fan of the kind of oral tradition, like I wanted to tap those particular pleasure spots within the novel. And yeah, hopefully one day someone will take me up on the offer and turn it into a film.
I would love it. I will be the first person buying popcorn. Seriously.
You'll have to race me for it, because I'll probably be second, if not first.
Well, you deserve to be first to see your book made into a film. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. Well, we already talked. I was going to ask this question, but we already touched on the urban legend of the little witch girl. So yeah. I encourage people to look this up. It is very creepy and interesting.
I mean, it's terrifying. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's giving anything away, but like, there's a mother and daughter who lived in Kentucky, in a very small town, rural community, and members of this community kind of believed that they were in fact witches. And given the kind of, and this was, I mean, well over 100 years ago now, the kind of the fear mongering and the kind of the paranoia that created led to these two women, a mother and daughter, being burned at the stake. And the mother, they buried her body somewhere in the woods. Nobody knows for sure where she's buried. But for some reason, the daughter, the people of this community were much more afraid of her, this child, for fear that she might avenge her mother and her death, their death, and come back to like haunt them or curse them. So right. What they did is obscene. It's absurd. Where they first buried this girl in consecrated ground in a church cemetery, in a steel reinforced coffin, under 6 feet of concrete, then poured gravel over top of her grave, and then wrapped it in a fence of interconnecting crosses to essentially kind of contain the spirit of this girl. And that is all theoretically true. That's true. Like, you can go to the Pilot's Knob Cemetery right now in Pilot's Knob, Kentucky, and go see for yourself this grave, where the urban legend kind of takes over, and maybe kind of there's a bit of a Venn diagram here, of dovetailing, but the urban legend is, if you go to her grave at midnight, you may see a little girl wandering along the confinements of this crucifix fenced grave. And if this little girl asks you to take her hand, don't, because she'll grab you and drag you underground into the ground. And this story has been shared virtually. You can go to YouTube right now, and there are several videos, cell phone videos, like mini Blair Witch videos of people just kind of like, I'm at the grave, I'm here, I'm waiting for the little witch girl. Did you hear that? Like, it's
right.
I mean, it's amazing to me because, as someone who loves to kind of indulge in these kind of legends, I am also a fan of urban legends and ghost stories. Having a piece of regional folklore, or like a hyper specific folktale or urban legend for this specific town in this specific state in this specific corner of the country, I don't know, like it really enamored me to this story, but also kind of broke my heart because, in thinking about it, it's like these poor women, there's kind of an element of truth to their story where, they were the victims of a terrifying crime, like this awful thing. And, to add kind of insult to injury, now their kind of tragedy has been transformed into a ghost story to scare people like me.
Right.
And it, I just thought about that for a long time in terms of like, well, who has the right to tell their story? Like, who has the kind of the freedom or the privilege to basically kind of take the truth and spin it into a yarn? And that kind of is one of the core conceits of the remaking, where, ultimately, I don't think anyone does. I don't think I do. I don't think filmmakers do. I don't, I think it's kind of oddly inappropriate, to appropriate someone else's tragedy and turn it into entertainment. This is totally and utterly hypocritical of me, because that's exactly what I have done. But it is this kind of, if it's not a discussion, it's at least a kind of a debate in terms of like asking the question, posing the question of like, well, who has the right to tell someone else's story, even if it is a ghost story? Yeah.
Right. And well, if you read the book, you'll find out how Jessica feels about that.
Not too happy. Not too happy.
So I really enjoyed the concept that you touched on in here about cursed films, because I remember growing up in the 80s, there was the cast of Poltergeist, and how
Yes,
people died these terrible deaths, and people believe that some films were cursed. The Exorcist as well. Lots of some tragedies happen on the scene of The Exorcist. So my question is, do you think a film could be cursed? But my real question is, well, do you think a film could be cursed, or is it just a series of unfortunate instances? But what I'm really asking is, do you believe in the supernatural?
Maybe I'm going to start backwards and work my way in. If I'm asking myself honestly, if I do believe in the supernatural, I think I'm agnostic to it. I don't think I do believe, but if there are ghosts, I want to believe. I am so ready. I am so, I am so down for them to be real. But I feel like if I had to pick, are they or aren't they, I would probably say they're not. But that said, I will happily eat my shoe, for there to be such thing as supernatural. Now, in terms of cursed films, and total sidebar, because we're all fans of spooky things, if you don't have a subscription to the streaming service Shudder, you should. Shudder is an amazing streaming service. And one of the reasons why it's an amazing streaming service is that they have a TV series, a docu-series called Cursed Films. And they have 2 seasons of it now. The second season just aired recently. It is astounding because I think it's usually like maybe 5, 6, 7 episodes a season where they focus on a particular cursed film. Wow. So they cover Poltergeist, they cover Exorcist, they also cover things such as The Wizard of Oz. I mean, it is astounding how the belief, the desire to believe that films can be cursed persists. And I think that, I always think of Poltergeist as being kind of the shining example of a cursed film. But even something like Three Men and a Baby, where you have that notion of, the urban legend of like, there's that one scene where if you pause it at the right moment, you can see the ghost of a little boy who died in the apartment where they just so happen to be filming that scene. Like, stuff like that is just kind of utterly catnip to me. But can a film be cursed? I mean, you look at something like Poltergeist, and it is astounding how the kind of, in the desire to believe and the want to believe, you can kind of draw these parallels between all of the personal tragedies of several of the cast and crew within that, and be like, it has to be cursed. There's no other explanation. But I feel like it may be straining credulity, but I would love to believe. I wouldn't want to necessarily make one or be involved or responsible for one. But I do think, yes, if nobody else has taken on the urban legend of the boy in Three Men and a Little Girl, I would love that. Someone needs to tell that story ASAP.
Well, I'm going to go home and watch this and pause it now. So I didn't know.
I mean, it's there. I mean, it's been it's been ultimately debunked, I think, but I still want to believe it. I still want to I see that boy. Pause it at the right moment. You get it. There he is. He's in the window. He's like hiding behind the curtains. You can see just like a little bit of him.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I got to go check this out. Let's see here. Oh, this is something that I was wondering about. Excuse me. So while reading this novel, it got me wondering about typical horror tropes that we see. So, for example, if you smoke pot and you have premarital sex, then you will be axed to death. It's just going to happen to you. And so what I was wondering while looking at this and reading this is, do you think that this was like a weird way that people, when they made these films, were trying to like promote, don't do that, don't do those bad things because this bad thing will happen to you? Or were like trying to teach morality? Or do you think it's totally opposite and they just wanted to put like nude women on the screen to get more people to come to the movies? I just don't know.
I mean, my theory, I feel like, there's a certain kind of putting the cart before the horse when it comes to the kind of morality of slasher films in particular, where I think, these films, you look at something like Friday the 13th, and of course Halloween before that, but ultimately you kind of want to think of the second generation slasher films, like kind of beginning with something like Friday the 13th, and I think that really, that in of itself was trying to ape the success of Halloween, but do it with kind of the kind of amping up of the titillation factor and the kind of the, you know, I love Friday the 13th, and if I had to pick a slasher film, that would be my film. But I I think it's pretty vulgar. And I whenever someone kind of, you know, when Sean Cunningham or anyone else kind of talks about the kind of like, you know, this is the morality clauses to, you know, don't do drugs and don't have sex kids. Like, it's kind of like, I think you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, or have your cake and slash it too, where, you know, it's this idea of like, you need a little bit of titillation and you need a little bit of violence and gore, and how do you juggle or balance those two things? Well, you know, of course the sex crazed teens are gonna have to die at some point or be dispatched in creative ways. So I think anyone who says no, we were either promoting this message or that was the kind of morality of these films, I think that comes later. And I think that's after someone started noticing a trend of like, well, all these teens are having sex and doing drugs and they're dying. Like, why is that? Well, maybe it's some kind of puritanical message that these slashers are there to really kind of like promote a positive, you know, message of like, don't do drugs, kids, don't have sex, or this will happen. And it's kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they can say it all they want, but I think it was my guess, my theory, and I have nothing to back this up on, is that someone else said it at a certain point, and then the filmmakers were like, oh yeah, that's totally what we're trying to do, like that. Yeah. But I don't believe it.
Yeah, no. I totally want to get, just while you were talking, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, I want to get like a t-shirt that says dare, you know, keep kids off drugs, and have a picture of Jason. Like,
I'd buy that t-shirt.
Yeah, but I know that I don't think it was to promote morality. I think it was more to, you know, put stuff on film that people are going to go see and things like that. But but really those sort of tropes kind of started in the 70s, I'm guessing, with you know, like Friday the 13th and.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you I'm going to be completely wrong on my chronology, but like, you know, a film like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, I think they're like 73, 74, maybe, you know, Halloween doesn't come out till like 81. Like, it doesn't come out till late, it's either like late 70s or early 80s. And I think it's more, you know, someone should be IMDbing this right now, because I for the life of me, I am convinced that Friday the 13th didn't come out till 81. Or maybe it's 78. It was
you might be
later.
Right. I mean, probably early 80s. Yeah.
So, but I do know that Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes out first, Halloween comes out next, and then Friday the 13th. Oh, 1980. Alan,
there we go. 1980. We got it.
Yeah.
Alan.
I mean, that's late. And I think like at that point, you know, Friday the 13th comes to the party, and it's the kind of like, I don't know, like for some reason it just feels like it's the dregs of the party. Like, that's the part where, like, you know, if you want to quantify Carpenter and Halloween as this kind of art form, like that the kind of like the model for slasher films to come is kind of, you know, is essentially established by something like Halloween or Black Christmas, if you're a purist. But like, you know, like the idea is that Halloween is the film that kind of sets the template. And then Friday the 13th comes along and like, it just lowers the bar so much. But I
love it so much. You know? I love it. So out of all the slasher people, I like Jason the best. I don't know. I identify with Jason.
You know, for my money, it boils down to like, there's two moments. It's in part 2 where the counselors are all kind of corralled together at the campfire, and the head counselor's like, I'm going to give it to you straight, guys. Like, here we go. Here's the story of Jason Voorhees. And I remember as a kid hearing that, watching that, and just being like, that is like, whatever you think of the movie, the story itself is now forever kind of emblazoned in my brain, and like to this day, like I like that campfire version, that version of that scene in that movie of one counselor telling a ghost story to a group of kids while I'm at home watching that movie on my dingy VHS. Like that to me that is the moment. And then in part 4, they do a kind of like montage at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, they do like a recap. It's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh my gosh.
Love it.
It's too good. Me too. Let me see here. Okay, so I really like the Ketchum is a character. He's a director in this book, and he's the first director, I believe. Is that correct? I think he's the first director. And so he finds that he needs to collaborate with financiers, and they want to make, movie with all these tropes. They want to have what Jessica drinks blood. What was it? Jessica drinks hippie blood.
Oh my
is
God.
the name that they originally want to name this film. And Ketchum, he wants to do a really wonderful cinematic, really tell this sad tale in a great way. But due to financing, he feels like he feels that he sacrificed Jessica, who is the little witch girl, on the altar of a blank check. So do you, in your career, have you seen people that had to do this, like such as people having to sacrifice their cinematic vision or their, to make a film?
I mean, for better or for worse, making a film is an art in compromise. There's this notion of like, there's the film you write, there's the film you make, and then there's the film you edit. And I believe that because every step of the way, it's almost as if from idea to inception to release, it's just this kind of like, I think I even say it in the book, where it's just like death by a million paper cuts. Like you just bleed dry by every compromise that comes your way. And I have been fortunate to get a couple movies out there that I've written. And they are nothing like what we conceived, what was the original kind of like, what the script was versus what we were shooting, like, because it's money. It really honestly boils down to money, where it's like, on set, on the day of like filming a scene, there's this moment where it's like, we actually can't afford to do this shot because we've just run out of time and we've run out of money. So what do we do? And you improvise, you collaborate, you innovate, and like hopefully come up with something maybe a little bit better than what you had in the script. But yeah, it's it's nothing, luckily, I think I've never had an experience quite like what Ketchum in the book has. I've written some pretty awful films before, but that's, I'll own it. I almost embrace it. But I do think that, like, yeah, it is astounding how just for a director, a filmmaker, to kind of tow the project across the finish line and actually get it to the big screen or the little screen. Like it's very, it's a lesson in heartbreak and, every day, daily heartache. But the last thing I'll say, I just want to kind of say this in case, this whole idea of the 70s movie in the book, it's actually me doing a little bit of fanfic for one of my personal favorite films of the 70s. So if anyone out there has either never seen or never heard of Let's Scare Jessica to Death, I wholeheartedly recommend it. This movie is amazing. It is one of my favorite films. I think it was made in 74. I'm totally blanking out on every proper date here, so
it's
don't
okay.
hold it to me. But Let's Scare Jessica to Death. It was this amazing film, low budget film, shot in Connecticut, I believe. And it's all it ultimately defies description, because and like you watch it and you still probably don't even know what it's about. But it is such a tone poem. It kind of favors mood and ambiance and just feeling vibes over actual kind of like, jump scares. It's not a scary movie in the strictest sense. So you'll watch it and you'll be like, that's not scary. But it's all about dread and what's real versus what's not real. And it's all from the perspective of this one character named Jessica, who has just recently been released from a mental institution because she had a nervous breakdown, and you never know why, what happened. But she and her husband move into a secluded house in the middle of nowhere, and this is their chance to kind of reconnect and regroup. But it just so happens that someone who has been kind of squatting in the house, and this is in the 70s with a little bit of free love still kind of happening. So they're like, hey, yeah, you can still stay here. You could be our guest. And they maybe shouldn't have done that because this person is or isn't something else. So, but I'll leave it at that. But I feel like if you have read The Remaking and you're still talking to me, I would wholeheartedly encourage watching as a companion piece Let's Scare Jessica to Death, because I feel like the book itself might make more sense, because you'll be like, oh, he's just copying that movie. But yeah, that's my rec for the day.
Well, thank you. I did do a little research, and I saw that was an inspiration to you. So I do plan on watching that. I don't know if the library has it, but we can also always get it. So
it's out there somewhere. It's on they've definitely, like, there is a devoted following to it, and I might be one of 5 people, but I will sing this movie's praises until the end of my days.
That's awesome. No, I always love to get recommendations for horror films. So I'm a Gen Xer. I'm assuming you're a Gen Xer. And, as a Gen Xer, we just continually see this remaking of all the films remade. So we've got, Rob Zombie remaking Halloween, and we've got the 2010 version of Nightmare on Elm Street. And I just wondered, do you prefer remakes, or would you prefer the originals?
I mean, I don't necessarily want to consider them sacred cows, but I'm enough of a fan that I do feel like I will always favor the original. And I mean, I feel like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my personal Casablanca. I just don't think that that movie needed to be remade. Sequels, right. I understand, but to remake it just felt so strange. But probably a little bit the same with Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. It just didn't, it doesn't make sense to me on a certain kind of personal level. I watched them. I spent my money, they got my ticket,
Me too.
So I'm either a part of the problem or, but it just doesn't matter. I think for me, the little heartbreak I feel personally is when some child, let's just say generation, whatever the next generation is.
I don't even know anymore. I think it's Gen Z now.
they'll be in the virtual video store, and they'll be like, I want to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And they might not know that there's this other one that they'll just go straight for Michael Bay. And that feels so, I think it's the erasure of the originals, even just the kind of the butting in line of a remake. I just don't want the remake to get ahead of the original.
Right.
But that is a losing battle that I feel like culture will not abide by. But I do want to say, specifically about the remaking, one of the original idea honestly came about after watching The Ring, the remake of The Ring. Because I remember watching the original Ringu and being blown away by it. And then here comes probably like, I mean, I think the original came out in 98, 99, I think. And then The Ring didn't come out till like 2001, 2002, somewhere early aughts. And when it came out, it was like, how are they going to do this? Like, how is Gore Verbinski going to take what to me felt like an inherently cultural ghost story? Like, this is like the ghost story itself is so embedded within the culture that the story itself is taking place in and from, that like, it was like, how is it going to translate? And fortunately, I think it did very well. Like, I think like the evolution of the story, it was kind of pleasantly surprising. Like, I actually really, really like the remake of The Ring. I think it's probably one of the best remakes, you know, as far as like shining examples of remakes like that, I think is a key. But I did have this moment where I was like, man, if I was Sadako and I was real and I heard that like there was this other version of my ghost story across the ocean being told by these other people, I would be really ticked off. I'd be miffed. Like, my story is suddenly being appropriated by people, by strangers, like who I don't even know. And I was like, oh, well, could like in that sense of like a cursed videotape, like could the curse somehow transfer across the ocean? Could the curse transfer to a new version of the film, like in a remake? And that honestly was what really kickstarted the whole notion of my book, you know, in the remaking. It was like, what is it like to take something that starts off here, goes over here? Can the source material, the haunted source material, transfer? Can it bridge the gap? And yeah, that was honestly the whole idea behind the book.
I
So we
love
can blame Gore Verbinski in The Ring.
I love the concept. I mean, that's just it's a great concept. Like, what would this entity or person think of you retelling their story? And will they curse you for it and follow you? Yeah, you never know. Oh, of course, you've probably been asked this a million times, but and it might be you might have already answered it, but what was the first horror film that scared you?
Oh, it's embarrassing. I'm going to admit it. It's an Saturday. No. I'm sorry. Student Bodies. There were two films that I saw kind of back to back, and they're both proto Scream meta horror movies. So they're horror comedies, and they're called Saturday the 14th and Student Bodies. I can't, in all clear conscience, recommend either of these movies to you. But when I saw them as a kid, because they were horror comedies and therefore had very little actual violence or gore in them, but they were always kind of playing on Saturday afternoons. So I remember watching Student Bodies on TV on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
just being kind of like, there's a particular scene at the very, very beginning, the opening montage, which is awful. I mean, it does not stand up to time. But I saw it as a like a 5-year-old boy, and it was terrifying. So it was Student Bodies. So don't, oh God.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Mine is Trilogy of Terror. So
was it the Zuni fetish doll?
Yes.
Of course. That's terrifying.
And then she puts it in the suitcase and it like sobs its way out. But I was so young, and they did play them on like Saturday afternoons. I don't know, Channel 5 or something. And
those made for TV movies what were they thinking?
I don't know, but my brother loved to tease me about the doll that came to life. I still remember it. So just in general, and I know this is probably a tough question, but where do you get your ideas from when writing novels?
It's super simple. The newspaper. I just look at the newspaper. I read the newspaper every day, and I clip articles that kind of resonate, and I put them away for a rainy day. So when it's kind of like, what am I gonna work on today? Oh, this is today's story.
That's cool.
Yeah, the newspaper.
That's amazing. I did not expect
truth
that answer.
is far scarier than
Well,
fiction.
yeah, right now the newspaper is pretty scary at this moment in time. Let's see here. I think we kind of covered it, but basically there's the theme. We already covered it, but the theme of the ghost story being retold and retold, and and basically that's where it starts. So, you know, there's a whole theme of people wanting to take away this story and tell it as their own story. And and I'm guessing that's how urban legends evolve. Is that how they
Yeah.
create? Or I mean, how they just kind of come to be?
I mean, I always find that urban legends kind of start with a kernel of truth somewhere, whether that's someone, you know, was roofied and woke up in a hotel bathtub in ice and their kidneys are missing, or, you know, like, or there was a fried rat in a Kentucky Fried Chicken box. Like, maybe these are not real, but maybe there was a thing, like an element of truth, and that's where everything kind of spins out. But I do think urban legends, by their very nature, have a kernel of truth that just reverberates out into fiction. And it's that kind of ripple effect, that reverberation that kind of takes away the truth and makes it more about, you know, almost like a ready-made ghost story for you. And you know, you sanitize, you whitewash the facts, the details out, and it becomes, oh, I heard my friend's cousin told me about this thing. And like it's the kind of that removal, that ripple effect that just kind of continues, and it's like you can pick it up at whatever ripple or whatever tree ring you're at, and then it becomes your story and you appropriate it, and then it ripples out from you, and then it ripples out from the person you tell, and all of a sudden it just becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy, this kind of endless cycle that, like, there's no getting it back. Like, whatever that truth, that element of truth was, like, I don't know if, you know, who that person was who bit into a bite, you know, of fried chicken, and then all of a sudden
I remember that
not
story.
a fried. But that we all tell it. Like, that's the thing.
We
Like,
do.
it's our story now. It's not that person's story. Yeah, it does feel kind of like appropriation to me.
Yeah.
On a very kind of strange level. Like, it's like I want to tell someone else's story, and I don't know whose it is anymore. Like, it just keeps going. It's lost its truth. It's history.
Right. It's so interesting how it's like telephone, where you're like, hey, I just, you know, da da da. And then by the end of the time, you're like, what is that about a banana? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, diving more into the remaking. So we see Amber, who is a character here who gets to play the Little Witch girl. And every time I think of Amber, I think of the little girl in Poltergeist. I don't know, I could relate to that.
Yeah.
And, you know, she's a child actor, and she's doing her first film. Her big break is, you know, being in a horror film, but I was doing a little research on that, and I was wondering if you feel like it's hard for child actors, don't you think, for like, especially maybe, I don't know, especially in horror, but like to be their breakout role. Do you think that's really hard for them to go on and be not, you know, like Harry Potter is always going to be Harry Potter, you know what I mean? Break out of that role.
Yeah. But I mean, Daniel Radcliffe is doing a great job of, like, he cashes that Harry Potter check and does independent, you know, films where he's
I've seen him.
flatulent corpse, and like he can just like
Yes.
he can do whatever he wants now, and he could play Weird Al Yankovic, and like luckily he's got talent to kind of back that up. Where I feel like, you know, one of the guiding lights for the remaking was Linda Blair, and, you know, her kind of you know, her casting and subsequent kind of grappling with the fact that nobody could see her as anything other than Reagan from The Exorcist. Like I feel like there's a certain inherent tragedy to that, because I'm sure nobody thought this movie would be as good or phenomenal of a success as it turned out to be. But like Linda Blair is the only one who was forever cursed
Right.
by that movie. Like that role is forever, it's her. And I've read interviews and like her kind of subsequent kind of career. Like it is astounding how that challenge, that kind of uphill battle of people meeting her on the street and being like, "You're Reagan." And
Right.
she's like, "No, I'm not. I'm Linda." And like,
Yeah.
and then like trying to be a child actress or have a career, and casting directors and filmmakers and studio execs not being able to see her as anything other than Reagan. Like
Yeah.
the Mark Hamill effect, the Luke Skywalker effect. Like it's you know, I don't, at least Mark Hamill kind of had a later stage career as something other than Luke Skywalker, only to return to Luke Skywalker,
Right.
where I think Linda Blair never, she never came out of it, which I think is, I don't know, it's heartbreaking.
It's tough, but we at the same time we love these movies and we need a child actor actress sometimes in these movies, and then I don't know, they just kind of get stuck in that stereotype. And I just wish people would stop looking at people just as a character and let them go on to another role and advance,
Yeah.
So, now we're going to get to the super exciting good part. Can you give us a little preview about Ghost Eaters? Ghost Eaters is a new novel coming out September 20th.
Yeah. It's I mean, I have high hopes for it. I think it's good. I think people will like it. It's a ghost story about a a haunted drug. Pop a pill, see the dead. And what happens when you're suddenly able to see ghosts, whatever ghosts are around you, and kind of asking the question of like, what is it like to truly be haunted?
Interesting.
And yeah, it's a doozy. I wanted to talk about grief. I wanted to kind of talk about addiction. But I also, for me, as a super duper fan of haunted house stories and ghost stories, I wanted to look at like what else is there out there in terms of like the haunted blank, the haunted doll, the haunted Pez dispenser, the haunted whatever. Like like to me, like I wanted to really speak to the idea of like, what is it like to be haunted, feel haunted, to haunt something, like just haunted was this, it was just kind of reverberating around my brain. And that is Ghost Eaters. It kind of focuses on a small group of friends who have just recently graduated college, and they are at a kind of nexus point or influx where it's like they are no longer kids, but they don't feel like adults yet, but there's that strange kind of like place where they don't fit in this world, and one of their friends passes away, and this haunted drug kind of offers an opportunity to reconnect, and spooky things ensue.
I think that sounds like a fantastic premise for a book. So I am definitely going to be reading Ghost Eaters. Absolutely. But and then the other thing that I really the main thing that I wanted to talk about is Unknown. Is this going to be so? Unknown is a psychological horror anthology television series. Will it be on Amazon Prime? Like, where will it be at?
That's the hope. I feel like I need to temper all of this by saying we are in the development phase, which is to say Hollywood in all of its machinations has designed a long track to make things happen. And every subsequent step and every hoop you jump through just leads to another hoop to jump through. And it's terrifying because any step of the way, this project can just disappear. At some point, someone along the way could be like, never mind, we're not going to make that.
Mm.
But that said, this project has been in the creation from like the original idea probably for like 5 years now.
Wow.
And we've made it to this phase in the process, which is Kilter Films. God love them. They are the producers and creators behind Westworld, Jonathan Nolan, Lisa Joy, Jonathan Nolan, who was one of the writers on Batman. And, you know, like, I mean, it is astounding how, that we're working with artists of this caliber, and they believe in the project, and they brought it to Amazon, and Amazon was like, yeah, sure, let's start putting this together. But it is the amount of track left to go is so phenomenal that I'm very zen about it at this point, where I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but
you never know. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to. I will keep on that and see if that does transpire. That would be really amazing, and lots of people I think would really enjoy that.
Well, it's great because it is that kind of intersection between urban legend and true crime, and it's that idea of like, you know, we focus on a particular region and we look at the local urban legends, the local folklore, and we kind of cross connect that to the events of the area, the true crime events of the area, and you know, say like, is there any parallel between this and this, and kind of using the folklore of the region to kind of tell a story. I guess like True Detective meets, what would it meet? True Detective meets True Detective, maybe. But it's like, you know, True Detective season 1 meeting, I'm totally blanking on a good comp. I was going to say The Shining, but that's probably not right. But, you know, like something that basically roots itself in a region, says this is the place. What are the ghost stories of this place, and how do they intersect or cross connect with the crimes and tragedies and history of that particular region?
That's totally interesting. So yeah, I am looking forward to that. I have we got at our library a pre-publication of Ghost Eaters. So it is on my shelf at home.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
It came to our
Yay.
library. So I'm like, what? I'm totally reading this. So it's on my shelf right now to read.
Amazing.
And just a little about Summer Scares. How did you get involved with Summer Scares? Did they just contact you and say, hey, do you want to be an author for us?
They reached out at the beginning of the year. I mean, they reached out kind of early. I mean, like it had been a conversation kind of ongoing for a while. But yeah, they were like, the people there, Becky, like, it's amazing, Conrad, like they're advocates for the remaking, and they wanted this to be in librarians' hands and readers' hands. And I, you know, honestly, like I just feel very lucky that, like, I mean, this book came out in 2019, and, you know, here it is years later, and, you know, someone out there still advocating for it. So I feel, you know, thank goodness for folks like Summer Scares.
Yeah, and we are too. So in the middle of our library, we have a big poster of you and advertising this program and your book there. And we also, I think we had a book, or we have a book club where your book was being read as well. So
wow. Yikes.
We're promoting you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, we have come to a full hour, and I just want to thank you, Clay, for joining us today.
Hey,
you're amazing to interview. I mean, look, we got claps going on. I love it. But you're just so fun to talk to. You're just so easy to talk to. And I was watching, you know, little other interviews of you before, and I'm like, this guy's cool. I need to interview this guy.
I made the cut.
You made the cut, definitely. So, and I want to thank the Summer Scares team for picking Clay as one of their authors. If nobody knows what Summer Scares is, it is basically 3 books are picked for adults, teens, and children that are horror genre during summer, and librarians can interview these authors as well as promote their books and just get people talking about the horror genre, because it's either I've learned you either love horror or people are like, no. But I'm like, but maybe if you just read a little bit, you might like it more. I want to thank everyone for coming today, and I guess that's a wrap. I just want to say keep reading, especially spooky stuff.
Thanks so much for coming out, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.